So B2, obviously built by Robert Blackburn. Robert Blackburn started his aircraft company in 1911. 1916 he moved it to the site at Brough, where the site is still there, but obviously the Blackburn Aircraft Company doesn't exist anymore. BAE Systems now owns that site, and it's the centre of design and support for Hawk. The runway's recently gone, but in 2016 they had their centenary there, and we took this aircraft back along with one or two other ones and did a display for them to mark their centenary. But I say the metal runway's gone, the work still remains, and it's owned by BAE Systems. And in fact, in the entrance hall in 2016 they put Sir Robert Blackburn's original desk and a cardboard cutout, but it was very lifelike, sitting at the desk, and as you walked in it was a double take because it looked for all the world like Robert Blackburn sitting at his desk in his office. It was very, very well done. So the site still lives, but Blackburn Aircraft Company obviously doesn't anymore. Right, the B2. End of the First World War, and the Air Ministry were looking for the trainer for the next generation, and they put a requirement out, and obviously there were several people answered the requirement to provide a trainer for the RAF for the next 20 years or so. And it's pretty well known that the winner was the Tiger Moth. The Tiger Moth was built in big numbers, and it was built under license around the world. I think there was well over 200 of them built, and if you count the ones overseas, more than that. And as a consolation prize to Blackburn, the Air Ministry ordered 42, and that's the only airplanes that were ever built of the B2. And those 42 aircraft were split between 4 auxiliary squadrons, one of which was at Brough. And they served sterling service before and during the war, and there are several famous RAF pilots who trained originally on the B2, so it's got quite a heritage with people that it trained. One of those squadrons was at Brough, and it was 4 FTS, 4 Reserve and Auxiliary Squadron, and this aircraft was on the books of 4 FTS up at Brough. And this aircraft was built at Brough and remained at Brough for many, many, many years, and only left there when it came down here about 7 or 8 years ago to the collection, and that's because the airfield at Brough was going to close. So long after 4 FTS went out of existence, and long after Blackburn ceased to exist, this airplane stayed at Brough, and we flew it from there in the summer. So 8 or 9 years ago it came down here, and the collection now look after it, and we fly it sometimes in the shows. It's not owned by the collection though. BAE Systems owns 3 aircraft in their heritage fleet. This is one of them, fairly obviously, because it's part of our lineage. If you take all the companies back from British Aerospace and work backwards, this was obviously one of the companies that eventually became part of BAE Systems. So we kept it, and we've still got it, but it flies, it's based down here. But for several decades, it lived at Brough. It was at one time the second longest aircraft serving at one base. Does anyone know what the oldest aircraft that never moved from one base is? It's the DH, well, officially I don't know, maybe some of you might know differently, but we think it's the DH-60X, the white one over there, which was Richard Shuttleworth's first aircraft in the collection, and it's been here ever since he bought it. It's never moved. But this was doing it's not quite that long, but this was doing quite well at Brough until we moved it down here. So the B2 itself, okay, consolation prize from the Air Ministry, but actually it's not a consolation as regards an airplane. It's actually a nice aircraft. When we talk about Tiger Moths, it's traditional to go dewy-eyed and isn't it wonderful. Actually, I'm not convinced the Tiger Moth is that great an airplane. I'm sure it was a very good trainer in its day. It has a lot of drag. The sweep on the forward part of the wing gives it quite a bit of drag. Performance is not wonderful. I sometimes wonder if the control column is connected to the outside world. I'm sure it served well as a trainer, but to fly, and I fly them side by side, this is a much nicer airplane to fly, for me. It's an all-metal fuselage, and that was pushing the boundaries, and Robert Blackburn did that. If you look at his designs over the years of various aircraft, he often came up with something that was quite well advanced, or something that was different, and he did it here. All-metal monoplane, although obviously the wings are metal tubing and then covered in fabric, and the same with the tailplane. So there's a little bit of a departure to do that, and it made the aircraft heavier, but also it's relatively streamlined. It's got a straight leading edge, not a swept one, so overall the drag is probably slightly less than the Tiger Moth, and it feels when you fly it like it performs better. It's also got side-by-side seating, which is quite handy with a student for elementary flying, particularly if you're doing things like nav. You can reach across and chat to him. And of course, this debate's gone on since the year dot, which is the better seating scenario, side-by-side or tandem. But for elementary flying training, and I've done a fair bit of that in my time, it's quite handy having the student next to you so you can actually reach across, point at things, point at gauges, etc. Particularly when the comms are pretty poor. And of those of you who've flown open cockpit, has anyone flown open cockpit here? You've flown open cockpit, you realise communication can be interesting, challenging, or impossible. Side-by-side does have some advantages. The wings fold, so it's quite, and it only takes a couple of minutes to do it. If I had an engineer here, I'd get them to do it, but I don't think we've got a spare engineer. Just pins that pull out top and bottom, you can see them here. They just pull out, wings fold back, and that's pretty useful for storing it. So hangars in those days didn't tend to be as vast as they are now, and it made it easier to put the thing away and store it. Back to the airplane itself then. Side-by-side seating, metal fuselage, gypsy engine, ubiquitous gypsy by those stages, inverted engine. Anyone know the rating of this one? There were loads of different gypsies of different horsepowers. Any takers? 130 horsepower. I think the book says the top speed's 112 miles an hour. It may be, I don't know. It's happy cruising around about 80, 85, 90 knots. It doesn't want to go much faster than that. And in fact, if you do go faster than that, you know you're doing it because the wind starts singing in the spars, and you can hear it. You can hear the aircraft start singing to you, so you know you're getting towards the top end of the speed range. To fly, I think it's delightful. I wasn't having a go at the Tiger Moth. Tiger Moth's a great trainer and it's been massively successful. But I actually think, as I say, this one flies better and is probably better and easier to instruct on, despite the fact there are only 42 made. Of those 42, the 4 auxiliary squadrons obviously were in existence for quite a long time. After the war, they gradually diminished. This one, as I said, remained at Brough for quite a long time. The auxiliary squadrons went out of existence, and the B2s, such as they were, gradually fell by the wayside. This one remained. There were 3 left. 1 crashed, 1 I think caught fire, and then that just left this one. So when you fly this, absolutely no pressure whatsoever. It's the only one left in the world. But then most of the aircraft here have got some provenance, or they'll be a prototype, or they'll be the only one left, or one of a very few. So it's an ongoing theme with most of the airplanes here, or a lot of the airplanes here are rare, and obviously we have to look after them accordingly. This aircraft obviously is aerobatic. It had to be as an elementary trainer, and it's an interesting little thing here. It's cleared to 4G, so four times the weight of gravity when you're aerobating it. The only problem with it is there isn't a G meter, so you have to feel that feels like about 3-4G. You've no way of knowing, but the book says it's cleared to 4G, which I find quite amusing. Like a lot of the biplanes, you've got a single fuel tank in between the wings at the top, and you can see a gauge underneath, which you can see quite nicely from the cockpit. And there's a red sector on it, and this amuses me as well. It says, when fuel gauge enters red sector, only 30 minutes of flying remain, which I think just amuses me. I don't quite know how much is in when it gets to the red sector. We don't ever fly at that light here. We've no need to. It just comes out usually for fairly short trips. Balloon tyres, obviously designed to be operated off rough ground stroke grass, which is what we tend to do. And in fact, when we do occasionally have to take it onto tarmac, which we sometimes do if we're displaying it, we have problems with the skid, because the skid's meant to be used on grass as well. And if you're going to take it down a runway, you're going to rub that away. When this was built in 1932, of course, everything, or pretty much everything, was grass. We do have a little conversion. We put a wooden block on it so we can land it on a runway. However, landing this on runway is like walking on a mill pond which is frozen with your eyes shut and one arm tied behind your back. It's very skittish, so it's not something to be undertaken lightly, and we tend to try and use it off grass if we possibly can. So owned by BAE Systems, one of the 3 that we've got, all based here, but flown and operated and engineered by the collection. We take it away quite a lot during the summer. BAE does, not the collection, for various heritage events. And the BAE Systems Heritage department is quite active. We go to a lot of families' days for our customers mainly being the Air Force people, Marham, Coningsby, Yeovilton, Lossiemouth, etc. So our major customers, we will often go to their families' day and their air shows, and we'll normally take our heritage aircraft, and this is one of the ones that we will often take. But as I said, we don't really want to land it on tarmac if we can avoid it, although we have done in the past. Apart from that, it's used here for displays. Occasionally we use it for training. At the beginning of the season, when no one's flown for 6 months, we sometimes will get it out, let the pilots just get their hand back in, because it's a very useful tailwheel aircraft, and it is aerobatic, as I said as well. In FTS days, of course, it was purely used as an elementary trainer. Nice to fly, prefer it to the Tiger Moth, only one in the world, whereas there's loads of Tiger Moths, so we feel quite honoured to be allowed to fly it. Could go on for ages about Blackburn and B2s, but I don't want to bore you. If anyone's got any questions about it, or how it flies, or what we do with it, please go ahead and ask.
Why was the Moth chosen over this? Was it cost?
I don't know.
It looks very expensive to produce.
I don't know. Honest answer, I don't know. I know at that time, in the 20s, there was a big debate going on as to what the ideal seating position was for training, and there was a big debate about, and it goes on still. You know, if you have one behind the other, the pilot, the student feels like he's in his own cockpit, therefore he'll, you know, fly like the captain of the airplane and make his decisions, etc., etc. That doesn't actually stack up when you do it for real. I think there was an element of that the Tiger Moths would prefer because it was tandem. I think there was an element of this is heavier, because it's metal fuselage, so I think there was an element of it all sounds a bit Star Wars in those days. If you go to Brough, they've got a little heritage department at Brough, and I went in there about 3 months ago, and as I got to the door, there was from about 20 paces or 25 paces, it was at the end of the hangar, there was one of these, and I went, there's another one. But in fact, it was a big model, life-size model, that they'd made for the centenary, 2016. And when you got you had to get close because it was good. But when you got close, you realised there was actually nothing in it. Anything else from anybody?
They're common to have control surfaces on the front of them.
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention, these are slats. They're slats and slots, because there's a gap between the wing and the slat. Unlike the Tiger Moth, where you can lock them and unlock, in fact you do lock them and unlock them depending on what you're doing, these are automatic. So when you get to low speed, high angle of attack, the slats will automatically come out. They'll start to chatter as you're getting close to the stall, and then as you actually stall it, the slats will come out completely. The idea being they give you more lift, and it's just worked on the airflow. As the airflow starts to get disturbed over the top of the wing, as you start to slow down, they'll eventually pull the slats forward to give you a little bit more lift. It's very useful for landing, because if you've got the speed right, as you go into the flare, they'll just chatter, which is really nice, because the airspeed indicators are not hugely reliable in older airplanes, so it's actually quite useful. But it's on the Tiger, you've actually got them, but you can lock them, or you do lock them and unlock them depending on what you're doing. These you can't lock in, they're just free flowing. So, is it common? Tiger's got it, this has got it. Some of the early 1920s so on airplane had them. Funnily enough, it's come back into vogue in the last 30-40 years. A lot of fighter aircraft now will have leading edge slats and slots, obviously to give you as high lift devices. It went out of favour for a while, but as I say, it's come back in. I think the concept's been known for long enough. It doesn't make a massive difference. It probably gives you another 2, 3, 4 knots. But I guess as a training machine, it's handy just in case the speed drops off. Anything else? Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you for listening. Good to see you. Enjoy the day. Thanks.